All right, today we're going to look at XSLT. I just wanted to get a nice title slide in here for this video when I put it in there. So give me a second here. Okay, so today I'm going to use NetBeans to show this XML XSLT Transforms. I probably should have shown you the whole thing here, but I wasn't sure how it was going to work, so I went ahead and set it up. But briefly, first off, let me have a quick question. How many people have used NetBeans in CP1 or 2? Or just have used it? Okay. Good. All right. So it turns out it's a way cool editor for doing web development. I probably won't be using Dreamweaver as much anymore. So if you go to the File menu, New Project, you have this HTML5, and there's 3 options. HTML5 application, which builds you a fresh application. HTML5 application with existing sources, which was what I use today. And then Cordova application. We'll look at Cordova just real briefly at the very end of the course. This is going to be a lot more helpful for you in the client-side web programming class when we do JavaScript programming. So for instance, if I go to the HTML5 application, NetBeans asks me which JavaScript libraries I want to use, and it downloads all the files I need. Dreamweaver doesn't do that. So that's pretty awesome. And then today you're going to see that it turns out that it has a really good support for XML and XSLT. I probably don't need to have an HTML5 project here. It turns out that some of the Java technologies use XML and XSLT extensively, and my guess is I could just do this without an HTML5 app project. But because I'm just getting into this, I did that. So what I did is I told it create an existing project from existing sources, pointed it at my file where I had all my files, and they're all loaded in here. So let's start by doing a quick review. This is the booklist file, and I had to update. This is an older one that I had in the online sources for you, and I updated it to match what we did on Tuesday. So we have the title, the author, the ISBN, the copyright date, the publisher, and then I added the price today. And basically I have like 5 or 6 books in here. So what I want to do is I want to do an XSLT transform that takes this XML data and creates an HTML5 page for me. And so I have the script already, and I'm going to kind of cover this material in a little bit different way than I have in the past. In the past, what I did is I started at the building blocks. I showed you each part of this, then we went to do the example. I'm going to reverse that this time. I'm going to use a spiral approach. So I'll show you a script to create the HTML5 page for my XML. Then I'll go through the tutorials I have that show you the little parts of the XSLT. I think this might end up working better because it'll reinforce it in a different way. So here's the XML. Let's look at our XSLT now. Now this was actually created in Dreamweaver. So this thing up here is a Dreamweaver comment that basically links this file to the one that it transforms. So this is called booklist2 HTML, and it has an XSL extension. Usually I would say XSLT to be clear, but that's how that tool defaults. This style sheet here that's loaded in the head of the document, Dreamweaver created that for me. I'm not actually using anything from there yet, but I happen to notice the last few entries, pound, yen, and euro. I might play with those a little bit here today because I have my book currency for the price set with those. Who knows what these are? Those are character entities just like the ones we learned in HTML. So for instance, if I want to put the copyright symbol in my HTML markup, I'll say ampersand or and sign, copy, and then a semicolon. And if you look here, it's actually defining that. So I can use this in this document with that mechanism where I use the and sign and the semicolon after this. So it creates what's known as a character entity. And so it's kind of like a variable, but it's more like a constant variable where this has a fixed value that's never going to change. Now, basically you can see that we have some useful things here. So we have the copyright mark, the registered trademark, the trademark, a dash, and then basically the left double quote, the right double quote, the pound, yen, and euro. So those are just symbols that Dreamweaver thought I might need to use, so kind of conveniently threw those in there. Normally I would not have this in the style sheet, and right now I'm not using any of those symbols, but I'm going to leave it in there. So don't worry about that, okay? That's not really important for what we're covering. If you look here at the first part, this is an XML document. So we have our left bracket, question mark, XML version 1. That's everything that's required, and then it does have an encoding of UTF-8. One thing that I found that is important to do here is to put that encoding in, because some of the tools that I use default to UTF-16 if you don't specify that. And so you'll do a transform and you'll persist it to a file, and then when you open the file you get all these weird looking characters, some of which look like Chinese and then some which are non-printable characters. And what happens is you're looking at a double byte encoding. So we almost always want to make that UTF-8 here, okay? The other alternative would be to use that ISO encoding that I talked about for the European characters that I use in my Norse work. Okay, the first part of this is boilerplate. So let me go ahead. You don't really need this. It's just my project root, so it shows the files. And it's a convenient way for me to move back and forth between the files. So let me go ahead and full screen the editor here. So really, if you ignore this doc type here that we have in the head of the document, we have the XML declaration. We have a little comment here, which is a Dreamweaver specific thing, which we don't need to worry about. What that does though is it ties this script to the XML source that it's going to work on. So in Dreamweaver I can click this and it'll display. It turns out I have a similar mechanism for that here in NetBeans that I'll show you. Okay? All right, the next part is boilerplate. This is the namespace for the XSLT transform. So this is going to be the same in every XSLT document. So you can see we have XSL style sheet version 1, XML namespace, there's the prefix, XSL, and then the URL. Now in this case, the URL actually goes to something, and that's where the standard is, okay? So basically, all of the XSLT elements here are going to all start with that prefix, XSL:, okay? All right, the next element is optional, and it just specifies the output method. And so you can see here I have HTML, and you can do HTML, XML, or I think text is the other option. And it turns out if you're doing a binary output, you use the text. That's also optional. You don't have to require that. And then I have an encoding in there too for the that I talked about already. Okay. You know, I'm sorry, I made a slight mistake here. This encoding at the very top is for this document. This encoding is for the output of the transform. That's the one you want to have to be UTF-8 and not UTF-16. Okay? So my apologies there, I got a little off track. All right. Then all of these documents are going to start with a template match, usually on the root element. So if we look at this, I have /booklist. That is the root element of my XML file. If we look over here, there's the root element. So slash book list is the XPath that specifies that, okay? And you kind of think of that as a bootstrapper. So every XSLT document will always start at the root somehow. Now, so basically what this is going to do is it's going to output HTML. Remember yesterday I talked about the output stream. So basically anything that I put here in the document is going to go into the output stream. So you can see here HTML, head, meta, character set, UTF-8, title, my book list, a link, relation equals style sheet, type equals text CSS, href equals book CSS. That's an existing style sheet that's going to style the output HTML document that I'm creating, and then I'm closing the head here. So these are things that are just going to go right into the output, and they're going to start to create the structure for the HTML file that I'm creating. Now, this is something I did some time ago, and it doesn't really reflect our new HTML page structure, HTML5 page structure. So I thought what we might do as we go through this is update it, okay? So basically you can see I've output the head of the document, and then I go to the body element. So what am I going to have here within the body? What's the first element? What's the structure of our HTML page we've been using all along for our student pages? A little bit louder? No? Section, right? So within the body, what do we have?
Section.
A section, and the section then has a header, main, and footer, right? Okay, so this is old school HTML. So let's go ahead and create this. And now notice NetBeans wants to close that off, but because I already have content, the section closing tag is actually going to go down here. Okay? All right, and then what's the first thing in the section?
Header.
Good. So header. And I will go ahead and put the closing tag in for that, but then I'll also go ahead and put the content in. So we'll go ahead and put an H1 heading, and we'll close that off. And then I'm going to go ahead and put a display title in here. So my book list. And then if I had a nav section, I would put that in the header too, but I don't here, okay? All right, what's the next part of the content? Main, excellent, okay? And again here I don't want to close main off because it's actually, the end of it is down here, okay? And then let me pretty this up a little bit so I can simply select and hit tab to indent this to make it make more sense the way it's indented, okay? All right. I'm not sure that we're going to need these divs anymore, but I'll leave them in for now until we see that we don't. Oh, I almost forgot something now. Whoops. So it looks like I made a typo there. You guys didn't even catch that. Come on. So what comes after main? Footer, right? And again, we'll close that off. And now I can actually use this copy. So I should be able to use that character entity like this, at copy, semicolon, and then 2014 Tom Wolfe. Okay? So we'll see how that works here. Okay, now here's the part that's a little different. So you see what I'm doing, I'm creating a div here, and I basically have a template that starts by matching the root of the document. Then in here I have an XSLT command that says apply templates, select equals book list slash book. One thing that's a little weird about this is it always matches the last element. So this is really saying from here select all the nodes, the book nodes, and this is a full path from the root, right? And then submit them to a template for book. And if we come down here, you see this template match equals book. Does everybody see that? So that's going to be the template that it's going to use. So the select statement uses XPath, which we talked about on Tuesday. It's going to grab all of the elements or nodes which are of type book, and then it's going to submit them to the template, and the template will run through the node list one at a time and generate the output for that. So now if we come down here, you can see that I'm going to have a div section for each book with a class of book. I'm going to have a paragraph called with a class of book title, and now I have some more XSLT that's extracting the data from the book element. So each book has a title, that'll put the title in, and then each book has an author, and that'll put the author in, and then a publisher and a copyright, and let's see how this works here. So there's some subtleties here too. So the way that this is laid out. So because the first two are paragraphs, they'll be on their own line. Then the book publisher is a span, and I have what's called a text node here to insert a space. So you can do space that you can put content that goes into the output in two ways. You can do it as a literal, like I did with the HTML tags, or you can use a text node in the XSLT style sheet. So there's no way for me to do a space without doing a text node. And certain other characters I can't put freely into the, just right here into the code, because they throw off the validity of the XML. So I'll put those in a text node as well, okay? In short, what this does is it's going to put a paragraph element with the title, then one with the author. Then it's going to create a span for the publisher and put a space after it, and then another span for the book date, which means that when those are displayed, they'll be on the same line. Then we have a BR tag in the output. Notice this style of tag. In HTML5, it doesn't matter. I could do it this way or this way, but in XML I have to do it with that special closing tag. And that's one of the reasons why all along I've kind of suggested that when you do your HTML5 markup, you should always use the XML style singleton closing tag, because you'll just get in the habit of doing that, and that'll save you trouble later on. Okay, finally we have the ISBN, and because we have a BR, that's going to be on the last line. Okay, let's go ahead now and add the price. I didn't have that in here originally, and so that's going to be, what do you think? Should we do that as a span too? I think so. There's no reason really to make that a paragraph. So span class equals book price, and I don't have this in my style sheet, so I'll add that to the style sheet as well. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and put the closing tag in, and then this is going to be XSL : value dash of, and then select equals, now what do I want here? How do I select the price with XPath? How do I select the price of XPath? I just use the name of the element. That's price. So that's going to be price. Okay, now, remember when we talked about the XPath, it didn't make any sense at all? Now it does, okay? So if you look at this whole thing starts at the top with the template match on the root of the element, which is right here. So slash means from the top of the element, book list is the title node, Then when I call this template, I call one more down for the book. So that selects all of the book elements and all their sub-elements, and it submits them to the template. Now, because I'm already here in book, these are all relative XPath links that actually start from book. So really what this says is, from this particular book, get the title, the author, the publisher, the copyright date, etc. Do you see it? Okay. Now, we also want some text in here. So really I'd like to say, price, and show the price, not just have a number floating there. So I'm going to grab my text node here to save time. I'll just copy it, and I'll paste it in here right before the span. And then I'll put the word price in there, and then I'll put the colon. Now, because it's complicated and I'm not sure I can do it on the fly, I'm probably not going to deal with the issue of currency yet, but I'll certainly show you that, because what we'll have to do with the currency is we'll have to do conditional processing. So what I'll have to do is I'll have to look and say, okay, if it's US dollars, then use the dollar sign. If it's euro, use the euro sign. If it's yen, use the yen sign. And that's a little bit more than I want to take on today, just showing you this introduction. But we'll come back and do that here. So we can do that conditional processing with the XSLT. Okay, let's take a quick look at the CSS for this. So I have a book CSS file. And basically, one of the things I want you to see, and this is really important, is I'm inserting the class selectors as I go in the XSLT. So here in the template for the book, I'm adding a class for each of the elements. That makes it real easy for me to put all of the styling in the CSS sheet. So if we look at the CSS, you can see here I have body div.book, p.book title, p.book author, because those are paragraphs, span.book publisher, span.book date, span.book ISBN. Now let's go ahead and add a rule in here for our price. Okay? So span.price, and let's see, that shouldn't be cursive. Oh, that's a font family, sorry. Okay, I thought for a second that was underlined. Let's just add something to this. We'll make the weight bold here. So font dash, again, this is NetBeans. Notice how it's giving me really good IntelliSense, probably superior to what Dreamweaver does. So font weight, make that bold, and then we'll save the file. Okay, so let me go ahead and pull the menu back up so we can look at the output of this script. So here are all my files, and to do this in NetBeans, I literally just figured this out a few minutes ago when I started to set this up today. I thought I was going to have to use an external tool that I have. So I'm looking at the book list to HTML. I'm going to right click, and notice I have check XML, validate XML, XSL transformation. And when I pop this up, it asks me for the source, which is the XML file, the script which I'm on, and the output. And notice I can output into the browser, or I can, oh, okay, I thought there was a way I could persist this to a file. Oh, I think that's going to work. Overwrite the output. So you see book list HTML? That just got created the last time I ran this. So it's actually persisting the transform. This is a very important thing to stop and explain. When you run an XSLT script in a web browser, it doesn't create a standalone file. It does it in memory. So I can have this in an HTML file, and it'll do the transform and display the transformed output, and that'll work fine. But if I want a permanent file, that's called persisting the file, and then I have to use a different tool to do that. And the tool that I usually use is a command line tool from Microsoft, and I write a batch file to do this. So this tool, NetBeans, lets me do that without having to use that script. Can I ask somebody to close the back door? Every once in a while I'm getting blinded by reflected sunlight there, and it's kind of throwing me off. Thank you. Okay, so I've already set this up, and whoops. Looks like I created an error here. Let's take a look at this and see. Oh yeah, I made a mistake here. So when I was typing this in, see the XSL value of select? I accidentally clipped off the closing elements there. So let me fix that. That's pretty cool. So it told me there was an error. All right, now to display your stuff here, you just say run the project, and that's going to actually, let's see. Oh, I made a mistake. Okay, I'm still getting used to the new tool. You actually use the XSL Transform to show the file. And I'm not sure, there's probably a way to tell it what browser to use like I do in my HTML, but here's the output. So we're looking at the output in Internet Explorer. There's my level 1 header, my book list. Here's the first book. It's author, or the title, sorry. It's author, the publisher, and the print date, which is on one line, and then the ISBN and the price. And right off I see that I didn't get what I wanted with the price there. So I'm going to fix the script so that's on its own line, or at least I would put some space in there. Okay? Let's see here. So right here in the script, you can see that's where it's putting the book price in. And so really what I need to do is just put another BR tag in here to fix that. Okay? So I'll go ahead and put that in, save the file, run the transform again. And now you can see that I have the price there. Okay? A couple of things I wanted to comment on. This is fairly complicated, so I probably wouldn't have the person that does the design for my site do this. I'd do it for them. But you might have noticed that I've set this up so they can totally handle the style for this document using the CSS. So I added selectors for every element in the page. If they had to mess with the structure, they could probably do that much if I gave them the XSLT. So this is another good example of why dividing all this elements up makes good production. So the content from the presentation. Okay? All right. Any questions on this? Are you kind of getting what this does? So I use the XSLT on an XML document to modify the document, and I can output it in a variety of formats. And so we kind of jumped right into what one of the major uses is, where we take the XML and translate it into an HTML5 document. Okay? All right. So it's all gravy from here. If I want to change the style, I change the style sheet. If I want to change the structure, I can do that in here. Right now I have these book elements as a div, and in the CSS I applied borders and stuff to those. And so if I wanted to change that, I could right here. Let's go ahead and let me go ahead and now start the presentations with the details of the XSLT. I'd like kind of a sense of where you're at, though. Is it like just horrible sorcery, or does it make sense? How many people are like, hey, I kind of see how that works, Tom? One or two? Okay. This is not really programming like we do with general programming language. This is like declarative, so you declare rules for things. Let me just go through this one more time just to kind of reinforce it, and then we'll go and get into more of the details of the specifics. So I start out, my XSLT is going to have just an XML document header, and that's always the same. So left bracket, less than, and then the question mark XML version 1. And then I can put the encoding in, it's not necessary, and that's the encoding of the script, not the output. Okay. Then, because this is an XSLT transform, it has to have this boilerplate code that indicates that, and that's going to be the same every time. And this is the XSL namespace. In this case, the namespace is an actual URL. So this is on the W3 sites org, and it's the definition for the XSLT transforms. Okay. Then I have an optional node which specifies the output. It defaults to XML if I don't put that in. But in point of fact, if you write a script that generates text, that's what you'll get. So you can really kind of ignore the output method. Here I used it because I was doing HTML. This encoding is important. This is the encoding of the output. And again, with most tools, it defaults to UTF-16, which most of the time we don't want. And that'll give us a bunch of crazy looking characters that don't display correctly in the browser. So although that's not required, it's pretty much needed. Okay. Every template starts with, every style sheet starts with a template that matches the head of the document. Stuff like this is going to go into the output stream. So it's going to go into the output from this. And you can see that all of this stuff will go one time, and that's the structural elements of my HTML. So if we go down through here, there's no XSL stuff until I get down to the content here. So this is going to create a single HTML document with a head that has this content, a body, a section, a header, a main, and then within main it'll create a single div called book list, and then after the template is applied, it'll close all that stuff off here. So you kind of see that we have this pattern which I call chaining. And so I have a master template that calls a sub-template, and you're not seeing it here, but often this gets pretty elaborate. I might have a chain of 4 or 5 of these templates. So for instance, I could go down here into the book template, and I could write a template that handles these individual elements. So it'll get all strung out together, okay? So again, the template, what it does is it uses the XPath. So the select is the XPath statement. And if you look at this one, it says from the root, the book list, select all of the book nodes. And that's going to be a node set. So that's every book node in the document at that level in the document. All right? And you saw in my example, I had 5 or 6 books. Then when I apply the template, it matches the last part of this. So the template is called book, match book. And then for each one of those books, it creates this output format here, a div. And you can see how it's putting the HTML markup around the content. Okay? So basically, when I get my first book, it comes in here, it creates a div in the output, it creates this paragraph, then it inserts the content from the first book's title, closes the paragraph, goes on and does the same for all of the rest of the data elements in that book, closes that off with a div, then it goes to the next book and does the same. So really this is a looping structure where it's doing this template for every book that was in the node set that got submitted to it. Okay? All right. You can think of the template as a function if that helps you, if you're like a programmer person. All right, so I hope that helped a little bit more. Let's go ahead and take a look at these examples that I have. And these are from a Rocks book that I found years ago, which I thought just did a fantastic job of showing this technology. So I have these XSLT demos, and whoops, sorry, that's the wrong thing. I might have to stop and get these from my Google Drive here. All right, hang on. Okay, so I've provided these examples for you. This is from a beginning XML 3 book by Rocks. It's fairly old, but this part of the technology has not changed. One of the reasons I like this is we have a bunch of very discrete, short examples. Each one shows one thing. And if we work through these, by the time we've gone through them, we know how to do a fairly a large amount of things with XSLT. So it's really, I think, a good way to learn. So let's go ahead and let me see here. I have the XSLT PowerPoint here. I think that goes through the examples. Let's try that and see if I'm right. Yeah, so it's from Chapter 8 of Beginning XML 3rd edition, Rocks Press. And you can get this on Safari if you're interested in doing more with it here. Okay, so just a quick review. The XSLT style sheet is going to be an XML document, so it'll have an XML header. Then it will have this XSL style sheet and the namespace. We saw that in the example I just looked at. And the first part of this that's functional will be the template match. And so now here it's matching just the root and not the root element of the document. So it's almost always going to match the root or the root element. As I mentioned, this particular transform is doing output to an HTML format. So I'm building the HTML document here like the one we just looked at. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly here. And then here is a template match for a person node. And you're going to see we have a sample file that has people in it and it does some stuff, and we'll look at this. So again, each person node has a name and a description. So we're grabbing those from the XML and then putting the coding around it to create the HTML output for it. Okay? So let's see, this is not going to work, so let's try this real quickly. Okay. All right. So we'll look at the document here in a minute, but basically it's pretty simple. The root node is person. It has, I think, 3 people, and I think it has 3 person child nodes, and then each person has a name and a description. Okay? So you can see that this is the first match, and it's going to then grab the, I'm sorry, this is the thing that invokes the template for person. So there's the full path, and that grabs all the person nodes, sends them to the template, and then for each person we create a level 3 heading, and we use their name as the text for the heading. and then we have a paragraph with a description. And again, if I wanted to do styling, which I almost always want to do, I'd throw a class in here to be able to do the style and continue with that. Okay? So the set of person nodes selected here will be sent to the template one at a time. And then again, the value of select element is the child element of the person node. So it's going to be here, name and description. Okay? So in English, for each person node, output the name as a level 3 header, output the description as a paragraph, follow that with a BR line break. Okay? Now, this is important. Remember I said at the beginning that we could have a complete element or attribute representation, and semantically those are the same. Here's how you can use the XSLT to change the transformation. So what happens now is if I had the data in the attribute form, this @name reads it as an attribute called name, and this @description reads that as an attribute called description. So this would be an XSLT script that refers to an XML script that's in the attribute format, where each person's information, instead of being elements, is attributes. Now remember I said that that's not a good idea, that you usually should only use the attributes to qualify elements. The preferred format is to use the element structure in your documents. Okay? All right. So you can actually link the XSLT in the XML document. And the reason you would do that is then if the user double clicks on the XML, it'll display the transformed output in the browser. And so to do that, you add this extra element here right after the start of the document. And so again, this is in my XML data file, and I just go ahead and list the style sheet there that's going to do the transform. That's actually the way that you do XSL as a style as well. So you can use it to just style documents. That's not used too much. Turns out there's a transform technology called XSLT-FO, formatting objects, XSLT-FO, that's used when you want to do that extensively. I haven't gotten into that too much. It's pretty specific. And usually the kinds of transforms I do are to HTML, so it's not really applicable. Okay? All right. So now let's begin to look at the XSLT syntax. So we have the XSL copy. And what this does is this creates a shell node in the output stream of the current node from the input document, from the XML document source document. And then this allows you to add additional child elements, which means you can convert data that's in the original document as elements to attributes and vice versa. So when I say XSL template match person, XSL copy, attribute name, first name, value select, first name. So what this does is it's taking the XML format where the first name is an element, and now it's creating an attribute instead. So the copy just creates a shell. So it will create a person node in the output, but it will now have a first name attribute rather than a first name element as a child element. Okay, so this is how I changed the structure from an element to an attribute form. And essentially what this is right here, oops, I can't really select that because I'm running it, is how to create an attribute in the output. So notice XSL attribute, you give it the name, and then the content goes here. So if it's a constant where I'm putting the attribute in, I would just put the text of the attribute there. Otherwise, I'd grab it, and so This is getting the first name as an element from the source and putting it into the output as an attribute. So it's transforming it from an element to an attribute. Okay? So again, I don't think I need to do that again. Okay. So here's how we go the other way around. So if I have an attribute in the source XML text and I want to output it as an element, I have an XSL element node that creates a new element, and again I give it the name of the element, and then within the node I put what will be the content. So here you can see the vice versa. Now I start with the element and I end with an attribute in the output. So here I'm reading the value. I said that backwards, didn't I? I start with an attribute and I end up with an element in the output. So here I'm reading the value of the attribute, but you can see I'm submitting it as the new content for a new element with the same name. So this changes attribute first name to element first name. All right, now copy of, not copy, but copy of just copies the whole node as is. And so a lot of times I'll use this because I've got a bunch of data that I want to save into the output, but I simply want to make a new change. Like maybe I've got a script that just adds a new element to an existing XML data. Okay, so that's what the copy of does. We use this dot operator, and it basically is a universal match. So it's going to always match the current node contents in the template. So for instance, in that node that we looked at the very beginning for our books, the template that matches book, the dot there would signify the current book node, and that's the entire node and all of its children and subcontents. Okay? We looked at the output method. It can be XML, HTML, or text. You can also exclude it entirely and it'll just do whatever output you specify. A lot of people do that when they do a binary or a text one. So basically, XML is going to go from an XML to an XML. HTML is going to go from XML to HTML. Text is anything else. And that's how I do my binary formats and other formats like PDF and CSV and things like that. Okay? Here's the if conditional test. Remember I told you it would do conditions. So you have an if node, XSL:if, and here's a quick example of that. So here we have a match where we're rolling through a different data file. It has these nodes called character, and the character has an attribute called age. And so if you look here, it says XSL:if test equals. So test is the conditional statement that's going to be true or false. And then at age, that's attribute age. And then and GT, what's that? Should recognize that as an entity, a character entity. And so what that is actually is greater than. So this says if the age is greater than 110. You see it? So we can't reuse the greater than symbol here because it would throw off the markup, so we have to use the entity for that. That's pretty common in other scripting systems too. If you use PowerShell, you have the same issue, and you use old school Fortran style comparators. So -GT is greater than, -GTE is greater than or equal to. Okay. All right. So basically, what this is going to do is the if starts here. Here's the end. If this is true, then we'll put this stuff into the output, which is going to be a paragraph, a deprecated bold tag that we don't use anymore. That's old school. The current value of the character, and then which is their name, is old age. So it'll say something like Methuselah is old age, and then it'll show the age. And it will only do that for the characters whose age is greater than 110. Okay? Instead of if-else, they have XSL choose. So you have and the way that choose works is you have when for the if and otherwise for the else. So it's kind of weird. I don't know why they implemented it that way. All right, let me pop out of the PowerPoint here because I got further along than I wanted because we have these examples that we're not seeing. And where are we at on our time here? Okay. Good, we're still up on the screen. That's very good. Okay, so let's start here with our first example, and it's people XSL, and then there's the people document, and then there's the people transform. So let me go ahead and I think I'll just open all this stuff, and let's see, is it going to let me do this? Into no. All right. All right. So let me get Dreamweaver open. I'm not used to doing this with the recorder on. I'm sort of being gun shy here because I want to make sure I don't screw up the recording. So bear with me for a minute here. All right, development. No, Adobe, sorry. There we go. Dreamweaver. Okay, let's make sure we don't have anything open in Dreamweaver already. We don't. Grab these files, drag them into Dreamweaver to open them. Pop this up. Let me get the font fixed here. Edit preferences. There we go, fonts. Jam this up to 22. Oops, damn it. I just closed one of my files accidentally. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not showing that in larger font. Let me try that one more time. Edit. Preferences, they're all set to 22. Okay, so here we have our people document. So notice we have people, then person. Each person has a name and description. So, and it's not indented, which makes it a little harder to see, but basically it's just people. It looks like we have three persons. They're world leaders, so Bush, Churchill, and Kennedy. Each one has a name and a description. If we look at the XSL, you can see that we have the standard format here, the transform. We match on the root of the document, and so now you can see this is going to output HTML, right? So there we start building the HTML document. Now notice this, information about, then I have an XSL value of select equals count, and then I have this XPath here. So basically what that is that's a function that's supplied in XSLT that counts how many nodes are in the node set. So because I have 3 person nodes here, it's going to actually show 3. So this will say information about 3 people. I'll repeat that again as a heading in the body of the document. Then I apply a template, and notice the way the XPath works. So /people person, and then the template will match the person element, and that's going to take the name and the description of each person and show it. So if we look at the output for this, which I've persisted to make it easy to show, there it is. Okay? All right. Let's go ahead and look at our next example, which I think I covered already in the slide. So this next one is going to take the and transform the structure. It should anyway. So let's see, we want the XML, the XSL, and the output. Okay. So here's the XML. This is a little simpler. We have persons, person, first name and last name. We have 3 persons: Jill Harper, Claire Vogue, Paul Cathedral. None other information. Here's our XSLT. Again, we have the template match. Now, this is an example that's going to start with XML and do XML output. So you can see that basically I'm just going to go ahead and output a new version of the document with the same root node, the persons, but now I'm going to transform it. And so in the original version here, these are all elements, and what's going to happen is I'm going to do them to attributes here. So again, we have apply templates. There's the XPath /persons person. We create a template to match the person. We do the shallow copy, so that's going to create a person node in the output, but it won't have any content in it yet. And then within that, we put the content that we want. And so now I'm going to create a new attribute called first name, and I'm going to take the value from the original document where first name was an element and put that in. So this is going to transform the person nodes to where it'll look like this. And so now you can see that I have, let me format that a little bit to make it clearer for you. I have a person, and then each person now, instead of having those 2 sub-elements, those child elements, they have those as attributes, okay? So do you see what I did? I changed the structure of the data. The data is semantically the same, but it's now structured differently. Here's the example of copy of that we talked about in the slide, and we have different information now. Let's see, that's going to be, so let's start with our, yeah, this is sort of a so what's kind of weird about this, you have to understand a business aspect of it. There's a relationship between a purchase order and an invoice. And so basically the purchase order is for the seller and the invoice is what the customer gets. And so what this does is it takes the data from the purchase order and it generates the invoice data from it. So you can see that in my purchase order, I have a from, a to, and an address field that has a bunch of data in it. And it's all in element form. And then if I look at my transform here, let me see if I can close this off so we do a little better. There we go. So I match the head of the document, and now I create an invoice in the output stream, and then I select the purchase order to, and I have a template. So here's an example where we have multiple templates. So I'm going to apply a template for the to field and the from field and the address. And the kind of thing that's weird about this is because of the relationship between the invoice and the purchase order, we're inverting the to and the from and switching them. So here, this is going to output and create the invoice, and the to field from the purchase order becomes the from field in the invoice. So you can see that there, okay? And similarly, the from field becomes the to field. So I have a template for each one of these now, and again, you can see how I basically use the XPath, and this is going to match the to template, this is going to match the from template, this is going to match the address template. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end here with this presentation so I can get it to upload. It's almost an hour long, and it'll take some time to render, and we'll continue with this. So we're going to be doing these XML technologies for 2 weeks, and then we're going to be doing some related technologies that use XML, in particular the SVG graphics.